25th at 7:30 p.m. Ditch the guesswork. Ben Stevens, Kevin Walsh, James Young, and Tom Vecchio have your NBA draft betting coverage pick by pick, bet by bet, all night long. We got all the insights and expert analysis, because betting blind isn't a strategy. Coverage starts at 7:30 p.m. on June 25th, only on SportsGrid.
The Minnesota Vikings, J.J. McCarthy, who had such a good training camp last year, and it looked like he was pretty good, I believe, in the preseason, if I'm not mistaken, ended up going down for the full year. The Vikings are still obviously committed to him.
They knew that McCarthy was going to be available at some point in June. And McCarthy actually went on record last week. They confirmed 2 weeks ago he was cleared medically. He did work last week. And he's going to be their starter.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
I'm with you in that you're going to have to take calculated risks. And that's what Leon Rose has been about since he's been here. And he's been measured. He hasn't been gung-ho in terms of mortgaging this franchise's future for immediate gains. They have had a prudent approach, and you're going to have to roll the dice in certain respects to get to that top level. And you're right, Donnie, when you look at next season, all things considered, you hope that they're healthy, and if they roll over, say, 85 to 90% of this roster, this is a top 3 team in the East. With Boston coming down, you know Milwaukee's going to come down, and so you have to figure it's going to be Indiana, the Knicks, the Cleveland Cavaliers in some sort of order in the preseason rankings. And so where they go from here, Jason Kidd is obviously the hot name right now. Both sides are interested from what we've heard in terms of Kidd and the New York Knicks. Is he that championship caliber coach to take the Knicks there?
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
The Panthers dominate as repeat Stanley Cup champs. Plus, where are the fans during the FIFA Club World Cup? Hello, everyone, and welcome to Front Office Sports Today from FOS Studios here in New York City. I'm Baker Machado.
And I'm Renee Washington, and thanks so much for joining us each and every weekday as we chat the biggest stories in the business and culture of sports. We also have NBA meme king Josiah Johnson joining us to talk about the NBA Finals and how the league is responding to the fans. But first, let's dive into the shoot-around.
And let's start in the WNBA. The Indiana Fever clinched his spot in the Commissioner's Cup Championship. That after their win over the Connecticut Sun Tuesday. And the state of Indiana has basketball fever with Caitlin Clark's team and the Pacers in the NBA Finals. So much so that both those teams are running out of merchandise. Both the Fever and the Pacers online stores have a notice saying that due to high demand, they're scaling back the amount of merchandise listed online to fulfill existing orders. However, Renee, they do say, don't fret, they will get back up running smoothly soon.
Yeah, it is remarkable because Todd Taylor, who's actually the president of business operations for the Pacers Sports and Entertainment, said that their team is working overtime. They're selling around 1,000 orders that they're fulfilling daily, and also just running out because in addition to the Fever, it is the Pacers NBA Finals run. This is the same group that was audited back in May because they were selling so much. So it's a good problem to have that whether in store at the Gainbridge Fieldhouse or online, they're selling quickly.
Yeah, and stay tuned. We're also going to chat the 3 players that got ejected from that Sun Fever game and the officiating concerns throughout the W later on in the show. Question, Renee, which NFL player made the most in licensing royalties, according to the NFL Players Association? Well, if you said Vikings quarterback J.J. McCarthy, you'd be right, even though he hasn't even played a snap. He pulled in $4 million from group licensing deals during the 2024 season. That, according to a report filed with the Labor Department. And that's the highest amount since Brady got $6.8 million during his final season in 2022. By the way, Travis Kelce also made the list this year. He was second with $3.2 million. Patrick Mahomes, who was number 1, now falls to number 6 with $1.9 million. But crazy about McCarthy.
Yeah, it is surprising. I understand for Travis, especially his relationship with Taylor Swift generated a lot of excitement and sales, but also just the fact he's been in 5 of the last 6 Super Bowls, winning 4. So that makes sense. But on the other side, for J.J. McCarthy, it just shows coming off of winning a national championship with Michigan, how college fans, move into the NFL wanting to get those rookie jerseys for the fact that he didn't even play a single snap with his knee injury back in preseason. So very interesting.
All right, NASCAR working towards returning its premier Cup Series to Southern California next year as discussions underway to race on a street course in San Diego. That, according to The Athletic. The exact location and the layout is not known, but NASCAR last raced in SoCal in 2024 when they held that season-opening exhibition race on an oval that was built inside the LA Memorial Coliseum.
Yeah, their second city street course race in 3 years. We're waiting for the details, but they said they wanted to move into SoCal, the market, the media, the sponsorship, and they're doing that with this race.
All right, meanwhile, we got some big OT finishes, but a dominant performance by the Florida Panthers in the Stanley Cup Finals. Let's take a look at that in our main event. And let's bring in our features editorial director, Meredith Turritz, who's been watching all of this for us. Meredith, what was it that you saw on the ice that Florida became so dominant and basically cruised, it felt like, except for those overtime games throughout the Stanley Cup Finals here?
Yeah, there was a lot of overtime, some of the most exciting hockey I've seen in a very long time, but you actually look at the score lines and you look at the result, and it was kind of a lopsided series. Florida has a lot of power. They are a deep team. They are physical. They put a lot of pressure on you, and the Oilers really found themselves up against a wall over and over again.
Well, it's interesting because for Florida playing in their third straight Stanley Cup final and repeating for the first time that's happened since Tampa Bay did it, now people are wondering, is this a dynasty? And I think when you look at the moves they made to get to this point, whether it's even the acquisition of the Conn Smythe Trophy winner Sam Bennett back in 2021 to more recently someone like Brad Marchand, what have you noticed they've been doing to build this superstar, really talented, depth-ridden team, and how that can continue moving forward?
Dynasty is such a funny word. People have been fighting over it for the last 24 hours. What's a dynasty? Is it 3 cups? Is it 2 cups? But I think what has really stood out about this Florida team is the roster construction. As I said, they're extremely deep, but there were 2 deadline moves that really made a big difference. The first is Brad Marchand. What can you say about him in this series? I believe 10 goals, 10 assists. And he played on the third line, but he was just such an impact player. Came over from the Bruins in March as the captain, actually. It was a really surprising trade move, and people are saying it's truly one of the best of all time. So that was a big addition, and the other big addition was Seth Jones, who is a defender. He actually tallied the highest time on ice through the playoffs, and it's interesting because he came from the Blackhawks, who we know are not doing so well. So for him to come from the Blackhawks to become a Stanley Cup winner, really, really big deal.
You mentioned Marchand. He was even asked last night during the telecast, are you going to be returning?
Oh, God,
he's an no pressure, by the way. Don't enjoy the Stanley Cup. We need to know what's coming up next. But he's an unrestricted free agent in the offseason. Also, Sam Bennett, who won the Conn Smythe, also an unrestricted free agent. Sort of what's the likelihood of them staying in Florida, and have they just sort of increased their value so much that maybe they look elsewhere?
I think it is a really tough question to answer. It's a tough question that Florida and GM Bill Zito is really going to have to wade through. The cap space is going up next year, but these are guys who are going to ask for a lot of money, and honestly should. I think Marchand's draft stock definitely, or trade stock definitely went up. The UFA market is really interesting right now. Mitch Marner is definitely the top target, but Bennett's going to be up there, and I think Marchand has really made his case as well.
Well, on the other side, the Edmonton Oilers fall short back-to-back seasons to the Florida Panthers, and they're a team that, unlike the Panthers, did not do enough at the trade deadline, especially in maybe acquiring a goalkeeper and solidifying that position. So I'm interested now because the Connor McDavid news has been brought forward of, will they be able to retain him financially? He might be looking for more as he's heading into the final year of his 8-year, $100 million contract that expires after 2025-2026 season. Did they not only lose the Stanley Cup final, but did they also possibly lose the best player in the world, Connor McDavid?
So tough run for the Oilers, right? Back-to-back losses, and a little bit of a heartbreaker for Canada. They have not won the Cup since 1993, the Canadians.
Crazy.
Yes, a little bit of a drought, I'd say. Stan Bowman at the trade deadline, the GM, was really adamant that he was happy with the construction of the roster regarding goalies, Stuart Skinner and Calvin Pickard. And, he said, we're not going to make this move. And I think the goalie situation was a big factor. They didn't really have a starter, and that burned them. And, it does throw out some questions for Connor McDavid. He could, sign an extension as soon as July 1st, or he could start looking around. Draisaitl is currently signed for about $14 million. It's possible McDavid will stick around and say, I want 14, say I want 15. He could test the market too. And, I think he doesn't want to be the greatest player who didn't win a cup. And it changes the dynamics for sure about the teams that he's looking at and how he, does or does not stay in Edmonton.
We saw an incredible Stanley Cup championship, but the ratings were in a different story here, given the fact that just over 2 million people, barely over that, watched it here in the United States, down 25% from last year. How much of that has to do with the fact that this was on cable compared to last year, which was on traditional regular television? And do we see the ratings changing next year going on ABC?
It's a tough mix of factors. I think, going up against being on cable, not everybody knew that the playoffs were on TNT. Last year we had ABC and ESPN. The rights rotate every year through, I believe, the 27-28 season. So you definitely have that limited audience, which is a piece of it. No U.S. Original Six franchise made the playoffs, which is tough. You lose the Boston market, you lose the New York market, you lose the Chicago market. We also didn't have Pittsburgh, which is a big factor. So all of a sudden you're already, losing some of those big markets, and those are markets that obviously watch and they follow. In terms of going forward, we don't know, right? Building a stronghold in the South can certainly help ratings down there. But, when you're missing those key players, not totally sure what you do from there. Yeah. And I think the other really interesting piece of ratings is we had the spectacular Four Nations face-off this year.
Right.
9.3 million viewers on the final, broke some records. And then we had Ovechkin's great chase, where he became the all-time NHL leading scorer. And those were big spectacles. Those were big audiences. And we didn't see that fervor, that momentum, not only on TV, but even on social media carry through into the playoffs.
Really fascinating. Meredith Turris, our features editor here at Front Office Sports. Thank you so much, Meredith, for your insight. And coming up next, guys, on Front Office Sports today, what does the NBA meme king think about the NBA listening to fans online? That's coming up next, right after this.
Here we go at Oakmont. Let's start with the course. What do we know about this course? How long is the rough, and does course history come into effect for you this week?
The U.S. Open has always been billed as the most difficult test of golf there is on the planet. And I tell you what, it's often labeled as the most difficult golf course in the world is Oakmont.
Game time decisions. Only on SportsGrid.
We don't want you playing here. Can you move positions? Do something else. He starts the season like 0 for 150, it felt like, and finally finds himself in a groove at the plate, hitting 272. 15 home runs on the season? Now he's shipped to San Francisco.
What is management going to do? Nobody who's paying you $313.5 million is going to hear anything from you. They'll figure out a way to get rid of you, and that's exactly what they did.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
Every 5 days, it's really exciting when Skeens pitches, and it's terrible watching him pitch because every time he pitches, they don't score.
Having him hit the lineup probably would actually help when he pitches. There's no way to do it because you can't, but yeah, it's beyond frustrating. And the numbers will tell you, the books have adjusted.
Pharrell coast to coast, only on SportsGrid.
Dialing it back to his old days with St. Louis and Arizona. Buy or sell, Goldie will finish top 7 in fantasy first baseman.
No, I'm going to say no. I think he'll fall off. Older player here, he'll be top 10, but not top 7 here. Top 10, I would say, yeah, I'd buy it. Top 7, I'm going to say no here. I think he'll put up decent numbers here. Not as good as he was. I don't think he's going to bat 340, 350 all year long.
Fantasy Sports Today, only on SportsGrid.
And welcome back, everyone, to Front Office Sports Today with Renee. I'm Baker, and the NBA seems to be listening to fans, Renee, in real time as they're rolling out changes in the NBA Finals, really as it's happening on the fly, from the Finals logo on the court to live coverage of the starting lineups and so on. So why is the NBA actually doing this? Well, let's bring in the NBA meme king and executive producer and host of Gil's Arena with Gilbert Arenas, Josiah Johnson. Josiah, thank you so much for joining us. Can you ever remember the NBA doing this before? Reacting to fans online and then doing stuff on the court?
Well, the NBA Twitter community has a great ability to apply the pressure, and they've done so very much so. Let you know what they like, let you know what they dislike very, very quickly. That's the beauty of social media. So I have seen the NBA Twitter community be able to force teams to make decisions, to force the leagues to make decisions that they may not have wanted to do previously, but that is the power of social media and the power of the community.
And we have seen players so actively involved, podcasts, even looking at like Draymond Green involved on NBA broadcasts while he's still playing. But now we're also seeing them switching over into NBA Twitter. It was Kevin Durant with the Twitter fingers, or X fingers, I guess you can call it. But now we're even seeing Giannis Antetokounmpo getting involved. Is NBA Twitter now expanding that players are actively, in your opinion, going to be getting more involved in the conversations and posts?
Well, I think Twitter and Threads and other social platforms provide players a great opportunity to control their narrative, to speak to fans directly, to say what's on their mind, to respond, to clap back. Tyrese Halliburton, who's been able to engage and communicate with fans, obviously was voted as the most overrated player in the league by The Athletic in a poll they did with an anonymous player poll. Had a big game in the playoffs, said overrate that.
Well, what is it about the NBA and I guess basketball specifically that they're able to sort of do this better than other sports? Because Roger Goodell's not listening to fans online and then tweaking the NFL because of that. Adam Silver is actually mentioning the chatter on social media. So what is it about the NBA that they can do this?
Well, the NBA has always had a great relationship with social media, making content clips available. People like myself who like to make memes. You can see the players' faces. Obviously, they have some of the biggest players in social media in terms of reach and following. I think from an individual player standpoint, probably the most social following across all the major sports in America. So you really get to really have real-time engagement, reaction, conversation, and kudos to Adam Silver and the NBA for listening. Obviously, the fans are going to speak their minds. They're going to tell you what they want to say. Sometimes it's off the wall. Sometimes it's crazy stuff. Obviously, with the logos on the floor, they tried to make up for it. Really wasn't the level of effort that a lot of us would have hoped. So we let them know that too. They ended up removing those logos from the court as well. But fans are always going to tell you how they feel, and I really just want to give the league, the NBA, credit for listening to what the fans have to say.
Absolutely.
Yeah, really interesting stuff. Really quickly before we let you go, what's your thoughts at NBA Central?
I'm rocking with Central. I think we live in a world now where there's a lot of misinformation put out there. But I appreciate Central for putting that setup out there. If people want to believe in and roll with it, not do their due diligence, not do their research, then they're going to end up getting burned. So I've come close to getting Central on several occasions. Appreciate what they're doing. It's a lot of humorous stuff. So for me, I'm always scrolling the timeline and always got to just look twice before I go with a story or a piece of information to make sure that it's accurate.
You haven't made it until you've been Central. Josiah, thank you so much for joining us. Josiah Johnson, of course, the NBA meme king. He's also the executive producer and host of Gil's Arena with Gilbert Arenas. Josiah, thank you so much.
I appreciate y'all having me.
Meanwhile, let's move over into the WNBA as the officials are now in the spotlight after 3 players were ejected from the Fever Sun game on Tuesday night, leading to Fever coach Stephanie White saying, quote, bad officiating is a WNBA-wide issue and everybody in the league is getting better except for the officials. So to break this down, let's bring in our women's sports reporter, Annie Costable. Annie, is Stephanie White right here?
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of evidence over the years, specifically the last 2, that have indicated that the officials need to grow with the game, and we haven't quite seen that reflected as of late, especially when you're looking at last night's game as a prime example. I mean, there were a number of incidents that point to just poor officiating, specifically when you break down who received what type of technical flagrant foul. There was a very clear separation between contact made in various incidents, and I think that alone speaks to some of the issues that we've seen with officiating.
Well, it's interesting because people complain for the NBA that it's too soft, whereas for the WNBA, the physicality has been there. We've seen that from opening weekend, yet there's a 25% decrease in terms of technical fouls that have been assessed to this date in comparison to last year. As the league's evolving, as the league's growing more, attention, and the talent has always been there, but continues to evolve as well. How have you noticed the officiating has not been able to reach the level in terms of how they're even acquiring officials, who the officials are, how they're being trained in comparison to a league like the NBA?
Yeah, so this is a tricky situation because a lot of coaches in the league don't want to speak specifically about poor officiating because they know they're going to get fined. Example, last night, Stephanie White went in. It was the second time this year that she's really gone in on officiating, and she's likely going to be fined. But when it comes to the WNBA officials, something that's been spoken about over the years is that players and coaches have seen as WNBA officials progress in their careers, they advance to careers in the NBA.
Not the W.
Exactly.
Wow.
And that's a reflection, again, of the prioritization of the WNBA, but also the experience level of these WNBA officials. Now, whether that's continuing to be the case, that remains to be seen. But this is something that has been brought up over the years by various coaches and players throughout the history of the WNBA.
In the last 60 seconds we got with you, how do you sort of see this going and evolving and moving on here?
I mean, I think there needs to be a checklist and more transparency when it comes to how WNBA officials are hired and how they're held accountable when errors are made. For example, last night, I think the best example of the mistakes made are when you look at the technical foul assessed to Tina Charles and Caitlin Clark, and that Marina Mabrey received the same technical foul. Now, when you compare the two incidents, completely different actions from all three of these players, right? Caitlin Clark and Tina Charles were assessed a tech because of unsportsmanlike conduct. Marina Mabrey actually made physical contact with Caitlin Clark. Where in your mind are you associating these two actions on the same level? Then we see it progress to Sophie Cunningham, in an effort maybe to defend her teammate, whatever the case is. But again, to Stephanie White's post-game thoughts, you allowed this physicality to happen. Here's where it went. This was the moment to check it. You didn't, so here's where it went.
And as a result,
not controlling the game.
Very messy as a result. Annie, thank you so very much for joining us. Coming up next, everyone, on Front Office Sports Today, where are the fans at the FIFA Club World Cup? We're diving into that next. Don't go anywhere.
On June 25th at 7:30 p.m., ditch the guesswork. Ben Stevens, Kevin Walsh, James Young, and Tom Vecchio have your NBA draft betting coverage pick by pick, bet by bet, all night long. We got all the insights and expert analysis because betting blind isn't a strategy. Coverage starts at 7:30 p.m. on June 25th, only on SportsGrid.
Maybe they are the best team out in the West because a rooting interest for me, Tom, always the Mariners. Hey, they're finally getting the hitting back, but now that's starting to slide.
We can make a case for the Rangers. They shore up some things. A team that the Rangers, you and I were both very high on coming into the season. They make a shot for the wild card. But I do think it's going to be a two-team race between the Astros and the Mariners, and that's really about it.
Yeah, it's a shame.
Pro Baseball Today, only on SportsGrid.
Does a guy like Giannis fit onto that roster if you can make some of those changes?
I just don't see a KD pursuit as being realistic for the Knicks. But hey, if they can pull a rabbit out of a hat, as Leon Rose oftentimes can, I'd go after Giannis in a heartbeat. It's just, what type of package could they entice for the Milwaukee Bucks? And is it a 3 or 4 team trade? It gets a little bit tricky in that regard.
You see the Knicks there with a plus 340 price.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
And welcome back, everyone, to Front Office Sports Today with Renee Washington. I'm Baker Machado, and FIFA is saying 1.5 million tickets have been sold so far for the Club World Cup here in the United States. And while 60,000 people were in Miami to see Lionel Messi and Inter Milan play, and 80,000 people saw PSG play at the Rose Bowl, if you look at a lot of the other games, Renee, it looks pretty sparse out there, as a lot of people are saying close to 600 fans were in the game at Orlando on Tuesday. Let's bring in soccer broadcaster Callum Williams to get some more insight into this and the tournament as well. Callum, you're joining us from Atlanta, where you've been calling some of the games. What's been your reaction to the fans in the stadium so far?
Well, at the moment, the reaction has been nothing but positive, as you mentioned, seeing so many people for the big teams turning up for the games like Paris Saint-Germain and Atletico Madrid. Wonderful to see so many fans against Inter Milan and Monterrey the other day. That was wonderful. Boca Juniors against Benfica. It's great to see so many football fans flocking from all four corners of the country, but also all four corners of the world for the FIFA Club World Cup. And so this is one of many things the FIFA Club World Cup is, but one thing that it certainly is a dry run for next summer when the cup comes here, when the actual World Cup comes here. And I think this is going to be a very interesting now couple of weeks just to see what FIFA plan to do, because as you quite rightly mentioned, the crowd, as you insinuated in Orlando, was not one that many will look back on with fondness. But I think what this is it is a real testing of the grounds here. It is an opportunity for FIFA to test certain markets, to see what works, to see what doesn't work. And with regards to the crowd in Orlando, obviously it was met with immense disappointments. But I think it's safe to say if you were to go to the marketing part of FIFA, I think they would probably admit that they got that one wrong and put that game in the wrong place, because you guys know, in the Northeast, there are a litany of internationals. And I just wonder that if you are hosting teams from South Korea and from South Africa, I wonder if you put the game in the Northeast, would the attendance have been a little bit better?
Yeah, it is interesting because the Club World Cup has averaged a little over 36,000 across the first 12 games. 10 of those games, of course, in a football stadium, an NFL stadium, or the Rose Bowl. But according to FIFA, 54% full in terms of capacity at attendance of these games. And ticket prices have even drastically dropped off by as many as like 25%. Travel bans, ticket prices, attendance, for something that many are considering a cash grab for FIFA. Do you think that they've kind of missed the mark on this inaugural Club World Cup and how it's been rolled out?
I don't think they've missed the mark. I think what they're doing, Renee, is they're learning, because the US market is unlike any other market, particularly when it comes to football, the world's favorite sport. And this is what I'm saying is going into the next year when the FIFA World Cup comes to the US, Mexico, and Canada, it's a really integral time for FIFA to understand what the market is and what it requires to be a success, particularly here in the United States. And so I don't think they've missed the mark. I think they would probably admit that they could have done one or two things a little bit better. But so far, in my opinion, when you look at some of the bigger games, as we mentioned, coming into the broadcast here, the games at the Rose Bowl have been wonderful. Some of the games in New York, some of the games in Philadelphia have had very, very big crowds. And look, I'm not going to sit here and suggest that the NFL stadiums are being full, because they're not. The Rose Bowl is the only one that's been full at the moment. But it's very difficult. And I think when you think about it, if you're a Philadelphia Eagles fan, or if you're a New York Jets or Giants fan, and you're going to the stadium in your market, it's your market. It's very easy to get to. But if you're a fan of, let's say, Boca Juniors, unless you live in the United States, it's difficult to get here. And right now, and not to go down this road, but there are people who are not US citizens that are a little bit scared of what potentially might happen. And so I think that's played its part as well. But at the moment, I think we can view this as a success. And look, it's only going to get bigger and better, the FIFA Club World Cup. As we get closer into the knockout stages, into the quarterfinals, these games are going to be even more meaningful. So far, so good for me.
I love that perspective.
Yeah, same. I agree. And of course, we're going to continue to watch Callum's coverage of all of this. Keep up the great work, Callum. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, guys.
All right, that's Callum Williams, soccer broadcaster. All right, and let's talk about what's going on over at the WNBA, everyone. Olympic runner Noah Lyles canceled his much-hyped 50-yard showdown against Dolphins receiver Tyreek Hill that was allegedly supposed to happen this weekend in Times Square, that due to personal reasons. Now, Tyreek, Renee, has been shading Noah on Twitter for canceling the race. So do we think this is even going to happen?
Apparently it was going to happen. It was going to be a big event. They were going to shut down the city, have billboards for it and everything. But it is interesting because Tyreek Hill just did a race last Friday and posted a really solid score with a 10.15. And I'm wondering, was this any sort of a factor for Noah canceling?
Yeah, it's a good question. We're off tomorrow. We'll see you Friday. Have a good rest of your day, everyone.